You ever catch something in the corner of your eye, but when you turn, there's nothing there? That's not your imagination. It's not a trick of light. It's him. He's always been there, waiting. Stay till the twist. Russell had lived alone since the divorce finalized last February, and honestly, he preferred it. The silence, the stillness, it offered a kind of solace he'd never known while married. There was no passive-aggressive noise, no heels clacking in and out of rooms, no sighs fired like bullets from behind a magazine or phone screen. His two-bedroom apartment on the third floor of a crooked old building was small, with cracking, plaster and radiators that hissed like reptiles. But it was his. No one could tell him to turn the light off or keep the volume down. But lately, the silence hadn't felt quite so empty. It began subtly, as these things tend to. A misplaced pen, a book fallen from the shelf, the cold feeling of being watched that crept up his neck like fingers. At first, Russell blamed fatigue, stress, loneliness, those hollow explanations people feed themselves when logic can't quite cover the gaps. But then came the dreams. They weren't vivid, not in the usual sense. They were more atmospheric. A single presence, black, formless, yet distinctly humanoid, stood in the far corner of his bedroom, just beyond the reach of his lamp's light. Always the same corner, always just standing, watching. It never moved, never spoke. Yet somehow, its silence felt thunderous. He started waking up at 3:17 a.m. every night. On the fifth night in a row, Russell sat upright in bed, breath shallow, drenched in sweat. The shadow had been closer this time. He was sure of it. Closer to the foot of the bed. He turned on the lamp. The corner was empty. But the unease lingered like smoke after a fire. He decided it was time to do something about it. "You need to get out more, man," Greg said, half laughing, half serious. He was Russell's co-worker and the closest thing he had to a friend. "You sit alone in that place too long, you're going to start seeing things." "I think I already am," Russell muttered, stirring his coffee. Greg leaned in. "What do you mean?" Russell hesitated. It sounded crazy, even to himself. But then, if he didn't say it, it would keep gnawing at him. "I keep seeing something," he said quietly. "In my apartment. In my dreams, too. Like a figure. A shadow. Always in the same place." Greg raised an eyebrow, but his voice stayed, even. "Have you thought about seeing someone?" "A shrink? A priest," Russell scoffed. "I don't need holy water. I need sleep." But Greg didn't laugh. "Just don't turn your back on it, whatever it is." Back home, the idea dug into his mind like a tick. Don't turn your back on it. What would happen if he did? What was he turning his back on? That night, he dragged an old chair into the bedroom and faced it toward the corner. He sat, holding a baseball bat in one hand and a flashlight in the other. The hours dragged. Midnight passed, then 1, then 2, and at 3:17 a.m. sharp, the temperature dropped. Russell's breath came out in visible puffs. The corner of the room darkened, not as a dimming of the bulb, but as if something was absorbing the light. It was there again, just standing. Not a trick, not imagination. It had no features, no face. Just a shape darker than night, like a tear in the fabric of reality. Russell didn't move. His muscles locked, his skin crawling. Then, for the first time, it moved. One step forward. Russell bolted from the chair, nearly tripping over himself as he ran to the living room. He didn't sleep for the rest of the night. When the sun finally rose, he returned to the bedroom. The corner was empty. The air, still frigid. He didn't go back in that room again for 3 days. Greg called and texted, but Russell ignored him. He couldn't explain it. He tried rationalizing, Googling sleep paralysis, Hallucinations, mold exposure, anything. But the fear wasn't logical, it was primal. On the fourth day, Greg showed up. "Jesus, you look like hell," he said when Russell opened the door. "You've been drinking?" "I haven't been sleeping." Greg glanced around the apartment, frowning. "Smells weird in here." Russell nodded. "It's been cold, too." They sat in the living room, Russell finally confessing the full extent of the dreams, the shadow, how it moved. Greg listened without judgment. When Russell finished, Greg rubbed his chin thoughtfully. "What if it's not in your head?" he said. "What if it's in the corner?" Russell blinked. "What the hell does that mean?" "Corners," Greg said slowly, "are weird. In geometry, they're points of convergence, multiple planes meeting at one place. Maybe things can get stuck there, or hide there." Russell was silent. Greg stood. "Let me see it." Russell shook his head. "No way." But Greg was already heading down the hall. Russell followed him reluctantly. The door to the bedroom was shut, the doorknob cold. Greg opened it. The room was dim, quiet, nothing visibly wrong, yet both men tensed. "It's right there?" Greg asked, pointing. Russell nodded. "Every time." Greg stepped forward, standing directly in the corner. "Nothing here, man. You—" Then he stopped. His voice died in his throat. He stared at the wall, unmoving. "Greg?" Russell asked. "What is it?" Greg turned slowly. "It's warm here. Really warm. Like a furnace." Russell stepped closer. He didn't feel any heat. Greg suddenly backed away, rubbing his arms. "Forget this. Let's get out of here." They returned to the living room, both shaken. "You felt heat?" Russell asked. "Yeah, for a second. Then it felt like something was listening." They didn't talk about it again that night. But the dreams returned. This time, Russell wasn't in bed. He was in the corner, as the shadow, watching himself sleep. He woke up screaming. At work, Greg looked different, tired, pale. "You feel it too?" Russell asked. Greg nodded. The shadow had spread. Now Greg saw it too, not just at Russell's place. In the corners of his own apartment, at work, in reflections. Not always there, but enough. Enough to make him feel he was being hunted. Russell felt it tightening around them, like a web. One day, Greg didn't come to work. Russell tried calling, no answer. By evening, he was knocking on Greg's door, no reply. He used the spare key Greg once gave him during a drunken night out. Inside, it smelled like rotting copper. Greg's apartment was trashed, papers shredded, mirrors smashed. The TV played static. Every corner of the place felt wrong, like they were deeper than they looked, like they didn't end. Russell stepped toward the hallway. A low whisper slid across his ears, not words, just presence. He found Greg in the bedroom, kneeling in the corner, facing it, unmoving. "Greg?" Russell whispered. Greg didn't respond. Russell approached, heart hammering. When he touched his friend's shoulder, Greg turned. His eyes were completely black. He smiled. "You shouldn't have looked." Russell screamed and ran. Later, police found Greg's apartment empty. No sign of struggle. No Greg. Just the smell. Russell stayed in a motel that night, far from the city. He couldn't go back to his own place. Not now. But at 3:17 a.m., he woke up. The corner of the motel room darkened. He screamed, punched the lamp, turned every light on, slept with his back to the wall. It followed him. He drove to his brother's house in the suburbs the next day. Didn't explain much, just asked to crash. His brother Patrick was skeptical, but allowed it. That night, Russell refused to enter any room with corners. He slept in the bathtub, door open, lights blazing. It didn't help. At 3:17 a.m., the mirror across the bathroom fogged up. 3 letters appeared. I'm Russell left before sunrise. He couldn't think, couldn't work. Ate only when his hands stopped shaking. He spent his days in parks, open spaces. Still, the shadow lingered, always just almost visible, behind a tree, beneath a bench. Reflected in puddles, he couldn't escape it, so he tried confronting it. He returned to his apartment, boarded up the windows, removed all furniture except the chair, turned off all lights except one lamp, and sat, facing the corner. He spoke to it. I know you're there. I see you. Nothing. You took Greg. Still nothing. Take me, if that's what you want. Just do it. The shadow stepped forward. It didn't touch him. It entered him. He screamed as ice spread through his veins. The room twisted, corners stretched, shadows bled across the ceiling. He fell unconscious. When he woke, everything was normal. He was alone, and he was smiling. He didn't feel fear anymore. Not exactly. But he didn't feel himself either. In the mirror, his reflection lagged behind. At work, people avoided him. Said, his eyes looked different. He said nothing. He stopped sleeping. Didn't need to. At night, he'd sit and listen. The whispers came clearer now. Secrets, names, instructions. Greg's name returned, again and again. Russell didn't understand, at first until he saw Greg again, on the subway. In the last car, he looked fine, normal, except his eyes. They met Russell's, and both men nodded. They got off at the same stop. No words exchanged. From then on, they met every night. They didn't speak, just stood in separate corners of Russell's apartment, waiting, listening. They weren't alone for long. Others came, a man from the post office, the guy who delivered Thai food. A jogger Russell once saw vomiting into a bush. One by one they arrived. Quiet, hollow-eyed. Soon the room was full. Each man stood in a different corner. Then the corners stretched. More space than geometry allowed. As if the room had folded, over and over. 1,000 corners. 1,000 men. Each with a shadow behind him. Russell understood now. They weren't haunted. They were becoming. He smiled wider. In time, he stopped responding to his name. He was the shadow now, and the shadow was them. Then came a new man. Young, nervous, fresh to the building, lived upstairs. Russell saw him on the stairs. Their eyes met. He knew. Another would join soon. The corner was never empty, and never would be. That's the thing about corners. They're made for holding things. Something's moving upstairs when you're home alone. He told himself it was the house settling. But houses don't settle like that. Stay till the twist. The first time Caleb heard the footsteps, he'd just cracked his second beer of the night. The sound came soft and slow. 3 distinct steps, then silence from directly above his head. He paused mid-sip, ears tuned like a dog catching a distant whistle. His mind offered up rationalizations before fear could root. Squirrels. Pipes, maybe the old beams adjusting to winter, except the footsteps had rhythm. He knew what footsteps sounded like. Years of working overnight security at that decrepit shipping yard had trained him to differentiate between a rat scuttling and a man creeping. He set the beer down, quietly. The house was his uncle's, and ancient Victorian in the hills of Vermont, left to Caleb after the man's sudden and unsolved disappearance last spring. Caleb didn't particularly like his uncle, a solitary, paranoid man who'd once accused Caleb of breaking into his study as a teenager. But free property was free property. It needed work, peeling wallpaper, warped floors, the constant stench of something damp and chemical in the air. But it was his, and it was quiet. Too quiet. He grabbed the flashlight. The hallway light had shorted out earlier in the week, and Caleb hadn't worked up the nerve to go poking around the fuse box in the basement. He'd planned to fix everything, bit by bit. He had time now. No job, no friends nearby. Just time and space. The attic door was in the hallway ceiling, a narrow wooden hatch with a pull cord that always looked like it was an inch from snapping. Caleb stared at it, trying to remember if he'd ever actually gone up there since moving in. He hadn't. It had always felt like the one place that was off limits, like it still belonged to his uncle. He yanked the cord. The ladder unfurled like a folding insect, creaking with the protest of dry wood. Caleb aimed the flashlight up into the darkness. Dust floated down in heavy drifts. Nothing moved. Probably just raccoons, he whispered. He ascended slowly, each step aching beneath his weight. When his head cleared the threshold, he swept the beam across the attic. Boxes. Dozens of them. Some labeled, some not. A child-sized rocking horse in the corner. A headless mannequin. Stacks of yellowed newspapers. A giant oil painting covered in a tarp. Nothing moved. No raccoons. He stepped fully into the space and waited, breath held, ears peeled. Silence, until 3 more footsteps echoed from the far end, just beyond the reach of his light. He whipped around. Nothing. Hello? He called out, absurdly. Low groan replied. Not from a throat, but from the house itself. The floorboards beneath him warped as if shifting under weight, but his flashlight showed only more junk. He backed away slowly, inching toward the ladder, every muscle tensed. He didn't sleep that night. The next day, he tried to rationalize it. Maybe he'd imagined it. The isolation was getting to him. It had been weeks since he'd spoken to anyone in person. He hadn't even set up the internet yet. No distractions, no noise, just him in the house. He didn't go back up to the attic. The second time the footsteps came, it was 2 a.m. They started with 1 slow step, then 2 rapid ones, then silence. Caleb sat up in bed, heart pounding. He stared at the ceiling. More steps. This time, directly above his room. He didn't grab the flashlight. He grabbed the bat. "I'm not playing this game," he muttered. The ladder protested louder than before, groaning like it was warning him. He climbed fast this time, adrenaline. Drowning fear. Again, nothing. Except 1 box was open. He was sure he hadn't touched it. The tape dangled off the sides like peeled skin. He approached cautiously, lowering the bat as he peered inside. Journals, hundreds of them, crammed spine to spine, all written in his uncle's spidery, obsessive script. The top one was open to a bookmarked page. I hear it again. In the walls, in the ceiling, in the floor. It moves like me. It thinks like me. I think it's learning. Caleb swallowed. He flipped a few pages. It wears my face when I sleep. I saw it once in the mirror, and it smiled. I didn't. Another page, dated weeks. Before his disappearance, it lives in the attic. I think it likes it here. I think I've made it too comfortable. Caleb closed the journal. He backed away. Down the ladder, closed the hatch. He considered leaving that night, getting in the car and driving to anywhere with streetlights, but he didn't. Something about the words had snared him. A sick curiosity, or maybe guilt. His uncle had died here, or vanished here. Maybe the journals were clues. Over the next week, Caleb read them all. He learned that his uncle, Frederick, had slowly descended into paranoia. The early journals were benign, notes on antiques, weather, musings about books. But over time, the entries became manic. He described seeing himself standing outside the house at night, watching, always watching. One entry described a conversation he claimed to have had with the thing in the attic. It didn't speak with words. It mimicked him, perfectly. It would wait until he spoke, then repeat it in his exact voice, sometimes hours later, when he was alone again. Caleb began to dream of it, a version of himself with no eyes, no mouth, just a smooth stretch of skin where features should be. Yet he knew it was smiling. In the dreams, it always stood in the attic, its skin rippling as if something inside were trying to push its way out. The third time Caleb heard the footsteps, he didn't move. He lay in bed, heart thudding, eyes wide. The steps were faster now, bolder, back and forth across the attic. They stopped. Then the hatch creaked. It had never done that before. He gripped the bat tighter. The ladder dropped. He waited. Nothing came down. The next morning, the ladder was still extended. He hadn't slept. Hadn't blinked much either. He stared at the hatch for hours, expecting a face. Or his face. But the darkness remained intact. That evening, he went back up. He carried two things: a video camera and a hammer. If this was a joke, some elaborate prank, he was going to catch it. If not, well, he had the hammer. He set up the camera facing the attic entrance, then climbed back down and waited in the hallway with the flashlight turned off. Hours passed. 3 a.m., the floor, sound of movement. The attic creaked, not just above, but around him, as if the wood inside the walls were flexing. The hatch began to open, impossibly slow. He held his breath. The ladder didn't fall. Instead, something peered through the crack. He saw only a shape, a silhouette. That matched his. Same height, same posture. Even the same way it tilted its head, like he did when confused. It never came down, just watched, then retreated. The hatch shut. Click. The next morning, the camera footage was corrupted. All 6 hours, just static, except for the last 30 seconds. In them, the camera had been moved. By someone. The lens now faced Caleb directly, where he sat in the dark hallway, unaware. Behind him, the attic hatch opened, then the footage ended. Left the house, packed a bag, got in the car, and drove 4 hours to Boston. Crashed at an old friend's place. Didn't explain much, just that the house gave him the creeps. But the dreams followed. The featureless version of him now stood in unfamiliar places. The guest room where he slept, the parking lot outside, even a diner bathroom mirror. Always smiling, always silent. On the third night in Boston, he woke to footsteps in the hallway. Not outside the room, inside. The door opened. Nothing entered. But when Caleb turned on the light, the words, "You left me," were scrawled on the wall in what looked like blood. Only it wasn't. It was ink. The same ink from his uncle's journals. Caleb checked his bag. They were there. He hadn't packed them. He left again. Checked into a motel under a fake name. Didn't tell anyone where. He locked the door, taped the windows shut, and sat with his back to the wall, lights on. He burned the journals in the bathtub, watched the ink bubble and hiss. That night, he dreamed of a hallway, a long, narrow one that stretched for miles. At the far end stood himself, naked, grinning, eyes black voids. He ran, not toward it, away. But the hallway never ended. When he woke, he found the word attic scratched into his chest. Shallow, just enough to bleed, but fresh. He hadn't moved all night. He saw the doctor, got sedatives. They didn't help. The thing wasn't in his dreams anymore. It was waking up with him, behind him in reflections, in other people's faces. He started noticing strangers on the street who looked too much like him. Men with his exact gait, his mole, his jacket. He called the police, reported a stalker. They took a statement, said they'd follow up. No one ever did. He realized he couldn't run from it. Whatever it was part of him now. Or maybe he'd always been part of it. He returned to the house. It was exactly as he left it. Dusty, cold, silent. The attic ladder still extended, as if it had been waiting. He climbed without hesitation. The boxes were gone. The attic was empty, except for a single mirror standing upright in the center. He approached it. His reflection stared back, but it didn't move with him. When he raised his left hand, the reflection raised the right. When he smiled, it frowned. Then it stepped forward, out of the mirror. Caleb didn't scream. He watched as the thing, the him that wasn't, tilted its head. "Why?" Caleb whispered. The thing didn't speak. But Caleb heard the words anyway, inside his head. "You fed me." It lunged. Caleb awoke in the attic, alone, drenched in sweat, but something felt off. He stood, stretched, moved to the mirror. The reflection moved with him this time, perfectly. He smiled. It smiled. He descended the ladder, humming softly. Later that day, a neighbor dropped by, an old man who used to bring groceries to Frederick once a week. He looked surprised when Caleb opened the door. "You okay, son? You look different." Caleb smiled wider. "I'm better." The man hesitated, then nodded. "You're staying then?" "Yes," Caleb said. "The house suits me now." That night, Caleb went to bed and dreamed of footsteps. Only this time, they weren't above him. They were inside him, marching, waiting. Tomorrow, he thought, he'd invite someone over. Anyone. Just for company. Someone new. Someone to feed it. He stared at the ceiling and smiled.